to the Artistry Creates the World, and with Mike Steadman. Mike, talk about those titles you have. Talk about that skill set you have. It's not just one area.
Yeah, well, the most important title I have is boxing coach, but I consider myself an entrepreneur. I'm a consultant. I'm an inspiring author. So just really just a high achieving individual, I guess.
And out of all of those, that creative thread runs through each one. And talking to you today is so powerful. And you love your people, people of color, and you really want them to thrive, especially in this environment where we need to understand what is a social entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely.
So talk about that a little bit.
So just to give you my background is originally from College Station, Texas. I had the privilege of attending the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And while I was in college, I got introduced to the sport of boxing, amateur boxing. I had a lot of success there, won 3 national championships as a light heavyweight boxer, 2-time most valuable boxer. And when I graduated, I went on to serve our country as a United States Marine infantry officer, deploying to Afghanistan in 2012, Japan and the Philippines in 2014. More importantly though, after I got out, I relocated to Newark, New Jersey, and to start an inner city boxing gym. And so in 2017, we launched the Ironbound Boxing Academy, and we train inner city kids for free around boxing. So really excited about that. And in the process of starting my gym and raising support for that, I became an entrepreneur, really just raising outside support to fund the program. And so, through my entrepreneurial journey, I've learned a lot. I've been able to just grow so much on like a personal and professional level, that I really want to make sure that I'm lifting as I climb and share with the people in the community. Because being a veteran, I've been able to read so much support around entrepreneurship, from free office space, access to resources, access to lawyers, things like that. And one of the things I realize is, people that look like me in the city don't tend to get those same benefits, right? So you've got amazing entrepreneurs of color at Rutgers or William Patterson around the state, but they don't really have the same access to resources like I do as a veteran. So I just want to make sure that all the stuff I'm learning and experiences I'm gaining, I'm sharing out with our people, because running an inner city boxing gym, one of the biggest questions I get asked from my kids are, yeah, coach, anybody that's hiring because they want a job?
Wow.
Right? And what do we need entrepreneurs to do? We need entrepreneurs to create jobs, right? And we need people to create jobs with empathy for communities of color, for our kids out here that are looking to grow and develop but don't really know where to start. And so it's important to develop, small businesses in communities of color.
Now, right there, we were talking earlier, and I was talking about you're an artisan. See, people don't call you an artisan because, we have this corporate environment. But what you're creating, and I have you here on the Artistry Creates the World, because you have that kind of indigenous kind of idea, that mentorship, that apprenticeship, like built in to the social entrepreneur. So we don't speak this language, but it's important for a person like you to come and meet other artists, because you add a piece that corporate America usually doesn't make that connection, or even academia.
Right.
So can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I think what separates me from most entrepreneurs is my background is in the humanities. So my undergrad was in history, and I'm wrapping up my master's in American Studies at Rutgers Newark. So I focus a lot on race, ethnicity, and gender. So I really don't have that like business background, but starting my gym and the community I'm focused on, particularly young men and women of color, it made me a social entrepreneur, right? And so like from a humanities perspective, we're always reading and learning about, a prime example, African American studies, talking about, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, the diaspora, learning, African cultures abroad, right? And a lot of times I think for us, when we're trying to help our people, we focus so much on activism that we also need to focus on business, right? So we can employ us, right? So we can, bring some economic development. And so I've kind of shifted into I've kind of considered myself like a capitalist now, right? Because I've seen the light, I've seen the power in giving somebody a job, because it's just such an impactful thing in an environment like Newark, where so many of us don't have jobs, right? And some of our kids don't have jobs. So the social entrepreneur is really thinking of creative ways to create impact through business. And for us, really it's around boxing and providing free recreation programs, and also employing us. But for other people, they focus on sustainability, regenerative agriculture, things like that. So I mean, the sky is really the limit. And the thing, I think corporate is kind of getting there, but what you're noticing is a lot of millennials, right? They're looking at companies and organizations that represent social impact through and through, not just in like their marketing, but like in their culture.
Yes, good point. Good point. But a thing I like to add, you also add that piece of you're reproducing yourself, and I don't think corporate America does that. I don't think the capitalist society really focus on that kind of mentorship where people come under you or people are trained by you, but then when they leave, even your interns, when they leave, they have this skill set that is very similar that they can go out and really function in society.
Absolutely.
As another social entrepreneur. As another social entrepreneur. And I think that's where a more organic kind of thing happens, whereas the rigidity of corporate America to me is that, you have a resume, you go here, you have a skill set. But these skills as social entrepreneurs, they seem to be more connected,
right,
so to speak. How do you see that?
And one thing we got to understand about corporate America is that a lot of the executives that are running these corporations, they came up in a different time, right? So when they were coming up, there weren't a lot of women in the office, right? At some of the higher firms, there weren't a lot of people of color,
Diversity,
So to be honest, like they don't really even know where to begin, right? So they're like donating stuff here, donating stuff there without real like a clear vision because they didn't come up with that. So, but now as times are changing, and every day I check my LinkedIn, there's always some new person hired as diversity inclusion, right? Like that's like a big term now. But as a social entrepreneur and being empathetic and understanding the community I live in, right? Like I've actually reached out to some young men to work for me, but I realized that, they need some development, right? So a lot of the kids here in Newark, like they don't even have laptops, So it's like, hey, send me a bio, and the guy sends you the bio on a note on his phone, right? Now he's trying to do well and he means to do well, but he doesn't even have the tools to succeed. So, but me living in the environment I do, being around them on like 6 days a week at the boxing gym, I have a more empathetic approach. So I understand that like if I'm hiring young men and women here in the city, I might need to develop them a little bit more, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing because to be honest, they should be learning it in school, but they're not. So it's like a business owner, right? When you kind of incorporate that growing into your culture, then it's like very powerful and impactful because like if a kid comes in the door or a young man comes in the door and he doesn't have a laptop and you teach him how to do bios and doing all that kind of stuff, then guess what? When he leaves, you've elevated him to a whole nother level than he would be at had he not worked for you. So I think as owners, we got to start thinking about that too. And that's why, those core values when they talk about business are so important. So like for us at Ironbound, our core values are personal growth, social impact, and economic empowerment, because we want all our employees who leave us to go off and accomplish great things and have the tools and skill sets to be able to do that.
Like you said that earlier to me, and it's so important to me, those attributes you talk about, within those attributes are the whole idea of character and integrity.
Absolutely.
We can't forget that because it's so needed today. Whatever you do, the character. I know religion covers it, belief systems cover it, but you have to bring it into this environment. Talk about how do you see art? What is art to you?
I mean, art is it has so many different meanings, right? So
what are your masterful meanings?
I think for me, it connects with you on like a spiritual level, right? Like at this point in my life right now, like when I look at art, I look for art that reflects me, right? I like to see art that encompasses a lot of the stuff that I care about, which is like boxing, business, and entrepreneurship. So like I like seeing movies, you can say plays, paintings of like black businessmen, black and women businessmen. I like that. I see that because I can see myself reflected in the piece. I can see myself reflected in like the movies, the music, the culture. I mean, there's so many different layers to it. And I think one of the things that was interesting about us chopping it up though was, there's so many talented artists here in the city of Newark, right? But they never receive the platform that they deserve because in our culture, we don't really learn business. right? And so we were talking about is like, imagine a lot of these artists would take the time to actually understand how to like work on their business and work on their brand beyond just like being so deep in it, you know? And that's what ends up happening, right? Like you start a business, you start a brand, but if all you're doing is like, I'll give you an example. If you're a dancer or you're a painter and all you're doing is painting, but at the same time, you gotta understand like, hey, you need to market yourself, you need to promote yourself. So a lot of artists, right, they're not focusing on the 20% that's gonna get them that 80%, 20% of input that's gonna get them 80% of the output, right?
Explain that.
So 20% of the work you do reproduces 80% of the results, right? So like me as an entrepreneur, I focus heavily on marketing and sales because that's what's gonna drive business and that's gonna drive growth, right? Posting on the social media and stuff is good, but at the end of the day, like if that's not gonna, you know, bring in money, right? What is it really doing for me, right? So like my social media is more for nourishing the people that are already following me, keeping them updated, as opposed to that's where the majority of my leads come in. And I think a lot of artists, right, they've got to force themselves to be business people, which means they need to sit down in front of an Excel document, right, and track their sales, you know, and keep notes about all their customers and email their customers to give them updates about some of the work and stuff they're doing. The artist needs to build out systems that's going to drive income, right? Because everybody needs to eat, right? You artists got rent to pay, you know, maybe they have employees, maybe they have people helping them out. So in order to do that, they need to focus on sales, they need to focus on marketing, but beyond just like spraying and praying, they need to have like a system for it, you know? They need to have a system for it. Like Monday through Friday, you know, I'm spending, 2 hours a day strictly on sales.
Dr. Jeffries talked about the same thing, the importance of systems.
Right, but we don't know. See, nobody teaches us this stuff. You know, we want to start businesses and we might raise a little bit of money if we're lucky, because people know for people of color, it's very hard to raise capital. It's very hard to raise capital because most people, they have a friends and family round. You know, they raise funds for friends and family. I mean, how many black people you know in your own life or in Newark that have an extra $10, $15, $20,000 for us to get our businesses off the ground? We don't have that, right? So, you know, and so when we are able to raise those funds to get going and we don't have the training, we're setting ourselves up for failure. Right. So, you know, I think that's why it's important for stuff like this, because what this does is it allows us to share knowledge and content to help people stay focused on the important stuff.
It's good stuff. Where can they find you? Your portal and your IG?
Yeah, so I'm real active on Instagram. My Instagram is Iron Mike Steadman. You can also follow us at Ironbound Boxing. That's my business, that's my brand. And for the corporate type, if you're on LinkedIn, just add me on LinkedIn. You know, this is something I'm real passionate about, right? My first passion is boxing, but I have a deep passion for entrepreneurship, particularly helping minorities, women, and veterans grow their business. So all the knowledge I learn, I like to lift as I climb.
Excellent.
Man,
thank you for coming by.
No, it's a pleasure.
This brother did an interview talked like 3 hours ago. I said, dude, you got to do an interview. He's like, yeah, so
yeah, let's go, man. This is exciting stuff. Hopefully we do it again.
Peace. Yeah.